Hi everybody. This is going to be a video in the first of a series called The Basics of Fire. This one's going to be quick and dirty, and I apologize right now. I am shooting this behind my house. I'm trying to stay out of the wind a little bit. It is going around, so if you hear an odd bike or something like that, I apologize now. But in any case, this is going to be a quick and dirty video on how to make a Tinder bundle. This is going to be the first of the series, as I said, because this is kind of I'm going to use building block principles, start at the ground up. So the first thing you should learn how to do is make a proper Tinder bundle. So if you already know how to do that, this video may not have a whole lot for you. But if you're new to the whole primitive fire thing, this is definitely a good place to start, because every other method that you're going to use from here up is all going to depend on how you build that very first Tinder bundle to get that fire going. So the better you prepare this, the better off you're going to be down the line. So what I have here in front of me is just some stuff that I was able to find around my house here. Some of it I did get in the woods, but to be honest, it was just like a walk in the park. I didn't go in deep woods or anything like that. All of this should be very common stuff you should be able to find fairly close by to where you live. That way you can practice this when you want. There is a fire ban in effect. Well, not a fire ban, but there is no burning or burn restrictions in effect today. So to light this Tinder bundle, I'll probably take it into my garage and put it into my wood stove. But anyway, the principles of it are going to be the same. So like I said, things I found just around home, this is just cattail fluff. I love using this stuff in my Tinder bundles. I call it a flash tinder, or it's the finest fuel I'm going to put in there. It ignites readily. It burns not super hot, but enough that it can get some of my other fuels going. And some of the stuff that I have here that this would ignite this here is literally just cured grass shavings. This is from last year when I was cutting my lawn. Use a lawn tractor. After I go to rake it up, I actually just take some of this stuff, put it in a pan, set it in my sunroom where the sun can hit it and let it cure out, and I'll put this in my fire bags or my fire kits, whatever you want to call it. This here is the wild dry grass, which I literally just walked around my yard. Actually the outside of my yard into the woods a little bit, found some dried grass. This will work too. This actually is still nice and dry, so this will probably work really well in place of this. You should be able to find this in most fields. The big thing is, if you pull this off the ground, make sure you take any of the damp stuff out. So if there's any green grass into it, you have to take your time and sort it out, and that's what I had to do with this stuff. There was a few green blades in there. That's going to hold moisture. It's going to make things a little bit more difficult for you. So with any of your fuels here, make sure that you get them as dry as possible. And sometimes if you're going into the woods, you can take this stuff and put it on an inside pocket or something like that, and it'll dry a little bit if it's really wet. The best way though, get it out in the air, let some air move around it, let the sun hit it, and dry that out till it's almost crispy crunchy, and then you're going to have the best luck with it here. And I apologize for the rocks, it's keeping the wind from blowing everything around. And probably the most common one that everybody uses, or at least knows about, in this neck of the woods, being Eastern Canada, is birch bark. And I harvested this stuff just from my winter's firewood. And this is great stuff. You might have heard me talk about in some of our podcasts, I use what's called like a Tinder Taco. So what that means is I would take a piece of this and start my whole Tinder bundle inside that. So I would take a piece about, yay big, and that's going to be the platform that I'll build my Tinder bundle in. And what I mean from that is that I will take this, put everything inside it, and then when I roll that together, that gives me something that I can hold the Tinder bundle in, keeps it protected from my hand, and it allows me, so if I blow too hard or something like that, the ember's not going to push straight down through my fire bundle, because that is something that can happen with people as they're learning this. They'll blow a little too hard into it, they'll push that ember straight down through their Tinder bundle, especially if it's a little too small, and then it will just pop out the bottom. And you'll be left with a Tinder bundle that just basically has a hole burned through it, and that's a sad time indeed. So, to do something like this, I'm going to have the base of my Tinder bundle. I'm just going to put a rock on there for now. I'm going to take some of the other birch bark, and I'm going to work that down fairly fine. So I'm going to take it and pull it into strips. And the idea is you want to break this down as fine as you can. The finer the materials, the easier they're going to ignite, and the easier time you're going to have trying to get an ember to catch in this Tinder bundle. So break that down into strips. I'm just using my fingers. You could use your knife if you want. It's entirely up to you. And once I get this broke down into strips, I'm just going to do a few more here. Always better to have a little more and not need it than not have enough and need it. And that's going to be true to basically all of primitive fire making, or just fire in general. So yeah, just a little bit more of this paper. And these inner sheets of bark, especially with the birch bark, you'll have your outer sides and your inner sides. The inner ones are the ones I like to use for the finer paper. Anyway, that seems like lots there. Now I'll take that and whatever, just gonna shred it in my hands. Break this down as much as I can. Of course the wind's gonna blow and take most of my work away, which is kind of a problem with some of this, but you can't pick the weather, right? Okay, so we got our base there. We have the start of our taco here. Take that. I'm going to take my stringy birch bark, lay that in, and you can probably guess what I'm doing here. I'm going to take the coarser of the material and work down to finer so that that ember hits the finest stuff first. I'm going to take my dry grasses, dump that in there. I'm going to take a little of this grass because it's a little finer than the other stuff, and I know this is good and cured. Put a good pinch of that in there. I'm going to take some fluff. That's probably a little too much. I'm going to put that right in there. And that's the basics of my Tinder Taco there. And you can see that's a pretty good amount of tinder. Another big mistake people make is they go a little too thin on this, make it a little too small. It makes it difficult. So now I'm going to take this into the garage, I'll pull you in with me, and I'll use a bit of char cloth or something and show you how to blow this into life. Okay, welcome back. So now that we're in my garage, I can light this up and put it in the stove and not have to worry about the burn restrictions out there. Let's talk a little bit about this. I'm going to have a little bit of an unfair advantage or disadvantage depending on how you work with this, because I don't have any wind blowing on me, so it's going to make it a little easier for me to focus the air the way I want it to. That being said, some people find a little bit of breeze to their back. Does make this a little easier, that way the wind can come in under their tinder bundle, put a little bit more oxygen into that spark or that ember, and give you a little better chance to go. That's something you're going to have to experiment with. I prefer to do it all by my own feel, so the less wind that I have going around me, the better I like it. But that's just me and the way I do it. I'm not saying the other way is wrong. I'm just saying try a couple different things, see what works good for you, and go with what feels comfortable. When I'm blowing an ember into this, you're going to notice that I do it a lot by ear. I go by how it sounds, and that lets me know when I have to put more air in or take air out. And honestly, I listen for a sound like sizzling bacon. I think that's the only way to really describe it. If it starts going away, that means that the ember is starting to blow itself out and it's not catching any of the bigger tinder in there on fire. If it starts growing and you start getting some snapping, that means your ember's getting a little hotter and it's hitting some of the bigger stuff. Probably needs a little bit more oxygen just to get it going, let it burn a little hotter. So I am going to use a piece of char cloth because I have some readily available, and we'll go from there. And we'll talk about char cloth a little later on in the video series. Before I do that though, just once again, you see I have everything layered in here. I got my taco shell, I got the birch on the outside, I got my dry grasses, then I got my flash tinder, or my finest tinders on the top there. And that way I'm going to make a little dimple, and I'm going to set the ember right down in there for when I start. And that's hopefully going to give me the best chance at getting this going. So I do have a striker here. This is hard carbon steel. This is what I'm going to be using for my striker. A little bit of char cloth. And I was lucky enough that somebody sent me a piece of real flint from overseas. So if anybody hasn't used real flint before, it is a treat if you're used to using quartz. Like that's pretty effortless, and you can see some good sparks coming there. And there is a form to this too, but like I said, talk about that in later videos. So we'll crack open the old char cloth here, and I do keep it in a little bag, just to kind of keep some of the moisture out. I tend to get a little longer out of my char cloth by doing it this way. Mind you, this stuff here is a couple years old now, so we're about to see how this works out. I'm going to take a pretty good sized piece. That might be a little much, but oh well. It's probably a little damper, so where it's old. Let's see if this will catch an ember for us. Or catch a spark more specifically. See the ember there, probably growing a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to take that. And this is kind of the beauty of charcoal. You can let that build a little bit. Now it's a nice big ember. I can set that down in there. And it is kind of self-sustaining for the most part, so we don't got to worry about it too much. Unlike a Bodro ember or something like that. But now I'm going to start blowing it into there. And there we go. So while that burns, hopefully you can see it there and the light's not overshadowing it. Don't worry about the smoke coming up. I'll open the bay door in a minute. But you can see it burned all that flash tinder really quickly, moved on to the larger stuff. And then the last thing to burn is really going to be that last sheet. And as you can see, it doesn't burn that well on its own, simply because it's so compacted together. And that's where the benefit is. As you've seen, as that got a little bigger, the heat on your hands can sometimes get a little much, especially if you're still learning to blow an ember in and stuff like that. And a lot of people start pulling their hands away. And that's just a real good way to start out, is the taco method, because it gives you that little extra protection on your hands. Now, that doesn't mean you have to exclusively use it. Later on, as you build up, you can just use a bigger bird's nest or a bigger tinder bundle, and that'll give you more area for your hands to go through. But that's about what I like to do, because all those materials super easily found in my area. Birch bark grows everywhere. Dry grass, I get it every time I cut my lawn, and I put it in my own little tinder kits. And there's nothing wrong with pre-prepping and getting some of that stuff ready and taking it with you. By all means, when you're out there, see if you can find some that's dry. Once you get the hang of how to make a tinder bundle, you blow a few into flames, see what you can find out there that's going to work. Some options for you is popple bark, the inside of it, as it dries, nice and combustible. As you've seen there, dry grasses work really well. Cattail or bulrush fluff is amazing flash tinder. Dried grasses, any real fibrous material, so any plant that's fairly soft and fibrous, if you can break it down your hands, you can pretty much use it for a tinder bundle. Dry pine needles, a lot of people use those, have good luck with them. Myself, I've never really had great luck with leaves. I have seen people use dry leaves and it works pretty good. I just find it hard to get good dry ones, because if they're on the ground, they always retain some bit of moisture, especially if it's in the woods a little bit. Sometimes usnea or old man's beard, if you can get that nice and dry, that works really well. But yeah, get out there, experiment with what you like, experiment with what's in your area and see what you like. There's no real wrong way to go about this. There's only little, excuse me, smoke's coming down a little bit now. There's only real fine tunings of the method that you use. So start with your biggest on the outside, smallest to the middle. Make sure your ember hits the small materials. That's going to make it easier to light. As the small materials grow into ember size, they're going to spread to the larger materials, lighting them on, give you a bigger ember, until finally it gets hot enough and you get flames. That's literally all there is to a tinder bundle, but it's amazing how often I see people not put enough time and effort into getting the tinder bundle. So they'll start with bow drilling, they'll get an ember, after some practice there, they'll try and put it into their tinder bundle and it'll go nowhere and they get really, really discouraged. And honestly, little prep work goes a long way. Okay folks, we'll see you in the next video. It will be with ferrocerium rods or maybe flint and steel. I haven't quite decided yet. Stay tuned and we'll see you on the next one.